Welcome again. My name is Bianca. I'm with the Men Engage Alliance as the Global Symposium Coordinator. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to the organizers of the session.
Thank you so much, Bianca, for starting us off. My name is Netsai Mshonga, and I'll be moderating this session. I'm sitting in Harare, in Zimbabwe, and I'm glad to be here with all of us. We have lost about 13 minutes so far, but I'm sure we'll be able to do good sharing and talking on this very critical issue that we are discussing today. So our topic will be implementing the Beijing Platform for Action in the Great Lakes region of Africa and the inclusion of men and boys in advancing the women, peace and security agenda. I think for us, we've been working on that agenda. We know that it's really critical to partner with men and boys so that we can achieve positive peace in our different countries. And our speakers today will be coming from Isoko Partners for Peace and Gender Equality, which is an international NGO, and also from the Women International League for Peace and Freedom. I know you know these organizations, and you have read about them and some of the good work that they are doing. So the format for our session today, I have 6 speakers. We have lots of experience in their work, and they will speak for 10 minutes each. And that will leave about 50 minutes for us to do a discussion and to do some practical sharing on these issues. I know some of us are actually living in this situation, so we'll be able to speak from a lived reality. So the presentation reveals the results of an 8-country study that was carried out by Isoko Partners for Peace and Gender Equality on the perspectives of young women in the Great Lakes region of Africa and the progress and challenges that exist in implementing the Beijing Platform for Action. It will also discuss the strategies for harnessing the expertise and resources across the region to fold into the mainstream, the discourse, and also creating a sustained movement and mechanism in the Great Lakes region for women's voices. Women, both young and mature women. And the presentation also discussed the necessary inclusion of men and boys for successful implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. We know there are violent masculinities in the Great Lakes region, and there is need to begin to engage in a discussion around decreasing those and making sure that men work for peace in their various situations. So Isoko Partners for Peace and Gender Equality are going to be starting off the session. And my first speaker will be Kelly Jones from Isoko Partners for Peace and Gender Equality. Kelly is the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator for Isoko Partners for Peace and Development. She's a lawyer by profession, a human rights activist, and a healthcare provider. Kelly's research and advocacy interests include improving women's access to justice and health services and developing innovative multi-sectoral partnerships and approaches to promote gender equality. Kelly will be discussing the research results from the recent regional study in the 8 Great Africa, Great Lakes region countries, and she will touch on the progress that has been made, the challenges, and the potential agenda for action for implementing the Beijing +25 in the region. Kelly, you are starting now at 15:17 by my watch, and I will give you 10 minutes to share with us your rich results from the study. Thank you.
Thank you, Netsai, for that wonderful introduction. And yes, I will keep my eye on the time and try best to move as quickly as possible through my presentation. So let me share my screen here. So as Netsai mentioned, I plan to discuss the progress, challenges, and areas for action for implementing the Beijing Platform for Action in the Great Lakes region of Africa. So a little bit more about ASOCO. I won't go too much into depth right here, but so we are an international organization, as Netsai said. We have partners that we work with in 8 countries across the Great Lakes region. And our partners and our work focuses on implementing the women, peace and security and youth peace and security agendas. We provide technical and capacity building support and look for opportunities in particular to help mobilize resources to the region. One of our partners, Deuce, will be talking a little bit more about ISOCO partners and the relationship that we have as a strategy for moving forward in the region and in implementing the platform for action. So 2020 ended up being a really big year. It was the 25th anniversary of Beijing. It was also the 20th anniversary of 1325 and the 5th anniversary of 2250. So there was a lot of momentum and potential for movement building in and around those intersection of those anniversaries. And that the plan was for that to then culminate into the Gender Equality Forum, which was taking place in Mexico and in Paris this year. In fact, they just finished the Mexico Forum. So Deuce from DRC, one of our partners from Uwezo Africa Initiative, wanted to conduct some regional research on the implementation of Beijing and take a pulse of what was happening in her region, and in particular to find out the perspective of grassroots women. So we on the project provided technical support, and we worked with our partners in the 8 countries that we work in. And so our research included an online survey in the 8 countries that encompass Burundi, DRC, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania, Uganda, and Central African Republic. And we also included focus group discussions and key informant interviews in 3 countries, Rwanda, DRC, and Burundi. We would have loved to have done it in all 8 countries, but unfortunately, we had limited funding. So it was encapsulated in those 3 countries. And the original concept, the original concept was to host a regional conference. After the research results came in, host a regional conference where representatives from across the region would come, in particular representatives from grassroots organizations, and to debrief, develop a uniform message and develop a uniform strategy and build on the momentum around these 3 anniversaries moving forward. Unfortunately, because of COVID, the conference unfortunately was not possible and not funded by our wonderful partners at Urgent Action. It will hopefully we'll find a new idea on how to bring everyone together regionally. In the meantime, our hope is that those same messages and strategies can be built at a national level in the interim. So I am going to be talking mostly about the online results. You'll hear more from our partners in the region about what's actually happening in DRC and Rwanda. So I will speak to the online results, and I'll also talk a little bit about areas for action. But the main results of the survey you'll hear about from Deuce during her portion. So the online survey, the profile, we received 114 responses. We were pretty impressed by our response. Surprisingly, we received a pretty equal number of responses from men and women, which I was surprised about. And French and English were pretty equal in their responses. The majority, almost 60%, were over the age of 36. Most came from civil society. We solicited surveys from people working in various industries around gender equality, including civil society, governments, donors, international aid organizations. But the majority came from local civil society organizations. Most, more than 60%, had at least 6 years experience. Majority came from urban areas and were in management positions. And the majority had budgets, because we did ask a little bit about funding and budgets of under 60%. 60% had budgets under 250,000, and almost a quarter had budgets under 50,000. Some of the key results, highlights from the online results. So one of the things we looked at is which critical areas were organizations mostly engaging in. Most organizations, more than 80%, close to 90%, worked in violence against women, followed by education and human rights. And you can see the various areas. One area which I was a little surprised about, which was one of the least involved, which was under 40%, was women in the environment. So I'm hoping that that through some of this research that we can build some additional momentum and action in that area, particularly because this is a very climate volatile region, which really impacts gender equality. The most sizable gains in gender equality in the last 5 years, education, healthcare, and law and policies. The top areas that people felt contributed to implementation in the critical areas, 41% said national government support, 70% said support from international NGOs, and 45% said funding opportunities. The biggest impediments to implementation, only 7% felt that adequate funding. So although funding opportunities were 45% in the contribution, people were really saying that they still didn't have adequate funding. 65% said that the critical areas were not being adequately addressed by their governments. Participation in the platform review process. We really wanted to understand what's the awareness level and participation, particularly, amongst grassroots, is what we were interested in. So for online results, 42.9% were very familiar or expert in the platform. 21% of online respondents were unaware of the platform. That number grew significantly in focus group discussions at the local level with grassroots women. In fact, there were some focus group discussions where no one was aware at all of the platform. 25.6% had participated in the platform lead up to 1995, and 43% participated in a platform review process. Now, most people who participated in a process participated at a medium or high involvement. So there really is not seem to be a process for more tangential or limited participation. It's either high or not at all. It seemed to be what the response was. Other reviews, 37% participated in CDAW and 57% had participated in SGG review process. Limitations to participation in the platform, the respondents said 42% said lack of awareness and equally funding constraints. Participation in the platform action, we looked at organizations based on budget. Organizations with budgets over 250,000 73% participated in a review process. For the smaller organizations, or I should say organizations with the smaller budgets, only 28% have participated in a review process. This I realize is a little bit overwhelming. And so really all this is just talking about is that the smallest organizations, which were about a quarter of our respondents, they dedicated the largest percentage of their budgets to actually implementing women, peace, and security agenda. So they dedicated the most money of their budget to direct implementation, yet they had the smallest participation in the review process. Satisfaction with assistance from UN Women and international NGOs and agencies. And this was fairly even across the board. 40% were satisfied, 35% neutral, and 25% were dissatisfied with that assistance. And assistance was, defined as both financial and technical. Challenges. So the greatest barriers to advancing gender equality in the work. And the number one, of course, was lack of funding capacity. And that also was followed by limited institutional capacities, lack of political will, and cultural barriers. And while the online results, culminated across the board, when we looked at each one country individually, these pretty much resonated the same. And most of these countries had a pretty similar history, particularly with conflict and gender equality, and pretty much the results were pretty much uniform. Greatest challenges to raising funds for the platform: 45% insufficient funding available, 43% lack of information about available funding, and 41% lack of long-term institutional and program funding. Now, when we went into the key informant interviews, a lot of as well as the focus group discussions, actually, the feeling was that some of the difficulty came from a lack of distrust by donors of grassroots women's organization, and also a feeling of favoritism amongst donors. COVID. So briefly about COVID. As for in the online section, we did ask about COVID. We did not really focus as much online about the gendered impact of COVID, though that was discussed, in country at the focus group discussions. What we looked at was what was the impact, both financial and in particular, as well as the shifting of activities. Because at the time, the women's organizations were shifting all of their activities into public health awareness. And they were stepping up. And so we wanted to see how many organizations were dedicating their activities to public health awareness and making themselves and putting themselves at risk, and making themselves public health experts. So percentage of activities that shifted to address COVID awareness, 25 to 50%, over 50%. Was so I would say the majority of people significantly shifted their activities. Again, I'm sorry, this graphic is a little overwhelming, but 89% of organizations reported some impact by the COVID crisis. 92% of all organizations shifted their activities to include some public health awareness and mitigation activities. 76 of our organizations, our respondents, replied that they felt that their ability to implement platform activities in the next 1 to 2 years was going to be financially impacted because of the pandemic. And so 77 of the organizations reported high or moderate impact on funding due to COVID. Smallest organizations felt the largest impact of COVID. For organizations with budgets under 50,000, 84% reported significant financial impact from the pandemic, compared to just 60% of organizations with budgets over 250,000. And so here's just another graphic. Organizations with budgets under 50,000, 83% reported significant financial impact. Organizations with budgets over 250,000, 65.2. And again, this portion really focused, our questions here just focused on the financial and understanding that there is a whole another impact, gendered impact, that we really looked at more at the local level. And so briefly, these were some of the messages coming out of the research, both from the online portion as well as the key informant interviews. And again, Deuce will really talk more about the key messages coming out and the key recommendations. But areas for actions, a uniform message developed at the national level, delivered at the regional, global level. Regional networks, trainings, and programs implementation. There was a real, a real push for people very interested in working regionally. A delegation of grassroots women reps to regional and global conferencing. Increase in direct and technical financial support to grassroots women. To improve local infrastructure, in particularly internet capacity, which significantly impacts women in rural, particularly rural women and grassroots women. Multi-sector approaches to programming, mainstreaming of platform and international doctrines into schools at an early age. Greater engagement of religious sectors and universities. Greater focus on gender-sensitive budgeting. Increase inclusion of grassroots women in platform review process, increase in male engagement in the platform implementation, and which we'll hear a lot more about from WILP. Movement and synergies, particularly state and civil society synergies, improved strategy and training for grassroots women on fundraising, and grassroots women inclusion in the design and development of local programming. A lot of times programming is given to them rather than allowing them to have greater say over what's implemented in the communities that they know more about than anybody else. So that's what I have. So I will yield the floor back to Netsai, and I'm excited to hear more about from Verdian and Deuce.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for that comprehensive presentation. I think you touched on really critical issues that we grapple with in terms of development. Issues of lack of funding for women's NGOs, adequate funding to do their work, and also distrust and favoritism that happens sometimes in the NGO sector. Thank you so much for that. I'm encouraging all those with questions to put them in the chat so that we can look them up and ask them right at the end of the session. But thank you so much for that. Now we will move to Vendiani Nyiramana, also from Isoko Partners for Peace and Gender Equality. Vendiani works for the Nimpwe organization, which was formed in 1988, and is an NGO registered to operate in Rwanda. The organization is one of the pioneers of well-established community-based organizations in Rwanda, with an aim of empowering women and youth to become economically self-reliant in line with the promotion of social and cultural values of Rwanda. And Vendiani is the executive director of Benimpo. Vendiani will be discussing major achievements and organizational challenges and recommendations in implementing the Beijing Declaration and also the Women, Peace and Security Agenda in Rwanda. Vendiani, you have the platform, and I hope you can stick to my 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. Let's take this opportunity to extend my gratitude to Men Engage, especially Bianca. We have been working together. And thank you to Isoko also I just want to start this presentation by thanking ISOCO partners. They have been working in the Great Lakes regional, and I'm glad to have been favored to work with them, implementing projects together. It was really a learning opportunity and a chance to advance the Beijing Declaration in Rwanda. Thank you also, Owezo, from DRC. We have been partnering together to implement this project in Beijing plus 2025. So I will talk here about the achievement, how Rwanda go about it. So to implement this Beijing plus 25, the government of Rwanda has been putting many strategies to be able to achieve this the Beijing 25. So as we know, all of us, after the genocide perpetrated against Tutsi, which actually we commemorate yesterday in all country, the country were destroyed, and the most affected women and children to this genocide. Actually, women and children were the most affected by the genocide. But the government of Rwanda has placed women's rights at its priority. The government of Rwanda ratified various international instruments aimed in promoting women's rights. They ratified and domesticated the Beijing Declaration Platform for Action and put in place a national action plan for implementing. So as we know, all of us, you can't say you will implement this Beijing if there's no action plan, if there's no budget related to that activity. So the government of Rwanda has put different actions to be able to implement that. So the government of Rwanda recognized the centrality in gender equality and empowerment of women in national development. This has been reflected in the Vision 2020. It has been revised, transition to Vision 2050. And the second edition of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction Strategy, the PRS2, the National Strategic Plan, and more decentralized levels such as District Strategic Plan, DCC, and a very low level of sector strategic plan. All those have been putting in place to make sure the Beijing Declaration will be able to be implemented in Rwanda. So as a result of all those instruments and the strategy and the action plan, as a result of the constitutional guarantee of gender equality and women's rights, as prescribed in the Constitution of the Republic of Rwanda, which was in 2003 and revised in 2015, Rwanda has continuously explored and reviewed legal instruments to ensure that gender equality and women's empowerment are a stronger legal reform. So also they have been putting some strategy to make sure women and children are are empowered. So some of those policy were the girls' education policy. This policy is the objective is to guide and promote sustainable action at the progress, elimination of gender disparity in education and training. One of the strategy was affirmative action. This affirmative action was try to increase the representation of various in sectors like political sector, economy, education, which they have been underrepresented. So also they have been putting in place the national policy against GBV. This national policy against GBV provides clear orientation to different stakeholders intervening in preventing and responding to GBV on how to do it, when and where and how. So all those mechanisms, also they have putting in place land management policy. This policy guarantee equal land ownership rights between men and women, which it has been not existing in Rwanda. Actually, it was only men was having right to land. So all these strategy, also the national gender policy, this also guaranteed the equal right to men and women and set for affirmative action to ensure gender equality. There's also many other policy which has been putting in place to protect children, women's rights and empowerment, like child policy. That is the strategy put in place to fight against the GBV, gender-based violence, done by using technology. There was also national ECD policy, National Childhood Development Policy, and its implementation plan. So, early childhood development for abuse, including that's based on gender. So there have been a lot of policy which the governments have putting in place to protect women's rights and children's rights. Also, there is an increased power participation in decision making. I think, as all we know in Africa, I think even in the world, if I'm sure, I think the Rwanda has the women, permanent women represented with 61.3%. In cabinets, women are 50%, so it's equal, like women. In the Senate, we are 38.8%. Judge, clerk, women are 49.7%. Private school, women are 8.8%, while in general education, women are rating 43%. Actually, all these affirmative action supports really to put women's and children protection at equal like women. So actually, up to this, as we know, Rwanda has been ranking in the global. I think recently we have been the first in the Global Gender Gap Index 2021 World Economic Forum. Rwanda has ranked 7th country globally in bridging gender gap. Also in the Global Competitive Reports 2015, Rwanda also was ranked 6th country as the best place globally, best in Africa to be a woman. So I think all those action policy which the government of Rwanda put in place actually encourage also the women to feel like, yes, we can do it. But although all those policy laws are in place, we still have challenges. Some of them still have challenges. During this research, actually, we got some suggestion of challenges, which is some civil society still, even the community still during this women's rights, equal rights, children's protection. But also we got some also recommendation. So during our data collection, many women organizations showed the following challenges in implementing the Beijing Plus 25 and suggested some recommendation. One of the challenges were lack of financial capacity, lack of strong human resource and technical experts. I think we are still lacking that. Also, limited institutions' capacity. Also, we still have a mindset which I think men still don't want to change. There's those unright law, if I can say that, where the culture of Rwanda, there's no way you will find that, but men, they still feel like they should be the owner of the house, the boss of the house. So they still don't want to change as they feel like women came to take over their power. I think, yeah, we still have way to go. Also, they give some recommendation to that research. So we need to build the capacity building and resource mobilization, be able to have advocacy in all level. Also, they recommend that we should enhance partnership, networking, the way we can transfer the knowledge mechanism among organizations. I think it's peer-to-peer learning in between organizations. Also, I think what we didn't mention, which the government of Rwanda has putting in place. In Rwanda, there's a law which women or men can be the lead of the family, which before that law only allow men to be the leader in the family. That's it. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Asante sana.
Thank you so much, Vendian. That was exactly 10 minutes. And Rwanda remains our beacon of hope in terms of gender equality. The numbers that you were talking about, representation in cabinet, representation in the Senate, Parliament, just perfect. And I'm sure we'll be coming to you for lessons learned in terms of implementing the Beijing Platform for Action moving forward. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Yes. You're welcome.
Yes, and once again, those with questions and comments, can you note them down? We'll be taking them right at the end of the session. Now we are moving to Dos Nyanamwenzi, who works for Uwezo Africa Initiative, which is a non-profit organization under Congolese law, and it was created in 2018 with the vision of helping to create a fair world where women and young women enjoy all their rights, use information technology and communication, and are active in all areas of development. Dos is a journalist, human rights activist, and peace builder, and is the founder of Uwezo Africa Initiative. So Dos will be discussing the results from the study in the DRC, including the progress and challenges. She will also discuss key overall recommendations from the study, as well as how a regional network model can advance the implementation of Beijing Platform for Action and the Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security agendas. Dos, you can take the platform. 10 minutes to you again. And those with questions, please note them down in comments and we'll be taking them right at the end. Thank you.
I'm now here. Sorry, I lost my internet. Now it's back. Really sorry.
Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. You can proceed to share your presentation. It's already there. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Kelly, can you help me by sharing my? Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so as Kelly already said in her presentation, I will try shortly to talk about the main results that we found from the research we did, and the integration of regional perspective on the women, peace and security, and the youth peace and security agendas and Beijing plus 25. As I assume you said, Netsai, about Uwezo, which is a Congolese organization. We are working here in DRC since 3 years now, and we are trying to help to create a fair world where women and young people enjoy all their rights, use information and communication, and also they are active in all areas of development. And we've been partnering with Isoko since many years, even before Uwezo exists. So joining the initiative, the regional initiative, is really interesting for us because it's matched with what we aim in our life. So to go straight to the key results that were found from the research. Let us talk first about there is first the picture that shows people in the focus group discussions and also while doing key interviews. The one on the left is from Rwanda, and the one from the left is from DRC, and from the right is from Rwanda. And so the greatest areas of progress when we were asking people about what they think was been achieved from in advancing women and girls' rights, using, of course, the Beijing Declaration and also other events and the situation that happened in past years. And the access to education was the biggest progress. And a lot of people were talking about UNICEF campaign on children and girls' access to education. And maybe this one, equality is almost there from men and women, I mean, from girls and boys. Also, laws and policies. From DRC perspective, for example, there is a lot of laws, a lot of policies that have been written here internally or even internationally, and the DRC government always take also international laws as on, like the 1325 and other African Union policies, and even on the world perspective. Access to health care. Also, there are some progress, but a lot of challenges also for women and girls to access to health care. And also monitoring and evaluation was really low, because there are not a lot of mechanisms of monitoring and evaluate what is being achieving. Also, when we talk about challenges to fundraising for implementation of Beijing Platform for Action in DRC, most of people say that application process is too difficult, and Kelly, of course, talk about it, like funding is really hard. And even Verdian just talk about the reality in Rwanda also, like access to economy, like poor economy is one of the challenges. Also, lack of information about available funding sources. A lot of women initiatives, they don't know where money is, where they can find the money, because information sometimes is just stuck somewhere and just few people know where is money. Also, limited institutional capabilities, because some international donors have really a lot of requirements, and local, civil society organization, they don't always match those requirements. Also, insufficient funding and competition for funds with other national or international actors. Nowadays, we found on the ground that local and international actors are like fighting just for fund, all of them. Also, we can talk about the lack of technical capacity and lack of financial capacity, limited institutional capabilities, lack of political will, because most of time you just need politicians or government to take action, but it's like civil society matter, and the political will, we don't found it. And there was one key questionnaire about the familiarity with the Beijing Platform for Action, and 84% of people that participated in the research said that they had heard about it, and only 40% were very familiar or expert in the Beijing Plus 25 review process. And here we have to mention, if you remember also one of the slides of Kelly, the questionnaire where most of people who answered live in a urban area, and then we can assume that they do have access to internet, and they are also active in women's movement, or also women's rights initiatives. Also, we found also that 4% participated in Beijing conference in 1995, and 28% have participated in follow-ups review, medium to minimal involvement. And this is the case from DRC. Now, what are the persistent problems? The first one is the level of gender representation in sectoral ministries. Like in DRC up to now, the constitution, the constitution say that women and men must participate equally. But the reality is that we still have few women in political positions and in sectoral ministry. Most of the time they just say, okay, the gender ministry, we give it to a woman because it's a woman, like gender is woman matter. But other sectors, we don't really find women, and people, they don't have that gender perspective in their mind. The second problem is the level of integration of gender sensitive budgeting into planning. When you go to an office and you ask if you do have a gender sensitive budget, people look at you like you just come from hell, like who are you? And also insufficient resources for operationalizing the national action plans, Resolution 1325, and the National Strategy to Combat GBV. These are really, really interesting documents that advance women's rights, but we don't have resources to make them operational. Also, we do have the absence of a clear strategy for the economic empowerment of women. There are a lot of initiatives, really good initiatives, but it's not clear that's how we want to empower women. And most of these initiatives, they are just slow money they provide to women, but to fund women in like big business or to make them sustainable, there is not a clear strategy to do that. And of course, the persistence of sexual and gender-based violence is one of the major problems. So the key overall research recommendations are these ones. The first recommendation improves protection of GBV victims and witnesses and increased prosecution of perpetrators. Also, popularize instruments such as the Beijing Platform for Action and the UN 1325 and 2250 and other gender equality related documents, particularly in schools. The third recommendation is a focus on income generating activities to promote the empowerment of women, and also strengthening of the capacities of rural women on the 12 critical areas of the Beijing Platform for Action, because in rural areas, really people are not aware of these 12 areas. To provide improved technical and financial support to women and young women, civil society organizations, stakeholders operating in the region. And this is one of the work ISOCO is doing with this regional initiative. Also, a regular evaluation of Beijing Platform for Action and related gender equality legal and policy documents. To build capacities on themes relating to COVID-19 and provide financial support to people who have been affected by COVID or by its consequences, and improved partnership between state institutions and civil society organizations for their to be successful implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action and related normative frameworks. So this recommendation can be used by anyone who wants to build his or her project using this key recommendation to advance the Beijing Plus 25. So let us talk about ISOCO, a regional partnership approach to implement Beijing Platform for Action and Women Peace, Youth Peace and Security agendas. The model of ISOCO is a regional NGO working group on women and youth for peace and security Central and East Africa. So it's time for African women and the youth and men, of course, to become experts of their region and to also work on any theme that advance equality. And the vision of this model is that the Great Lakes region of Africa is peaceful and prosperous due to the strong and equal partnership in peace-building processes to break out the vicious cycle of violence, that we can't ignore that our countries have been in wars, one against the other, and it's time to live peacefully. But this peace, it must be built on an equality model between men and women. And why a regional model? That's the key question. First of all, for more effectivity, communal violence and conflicts underline the critical necessity for men and women to work jointly to address the peril to their collective future as well as their present lives. Also, a cross-border initiative for sustainability, historic and cultural connections, current regional conflict, and the potentiality of capacities sharing are the key motivations to engage men and women in a cross-gender transformative process for the stability and dignity for all. Before I finish my presentation, let me say that the regional network is also a socio-ecological model because individual change creates role models for friends and families. Friends and families live the change, and the change is tested through research, documentation, and information dissemination at the regional and country levels to change norms. And key stakeholders at regional and country levels are involved in a participative advocacy for social change. So ISOCO short and long-term initiative will be related to in regional monitoring 1325, framework of hope monitoring and evaluation, fact-based advocacy and lobbying processes for gender equality laws and development policies, regional and community early warning systems for SGBV, as well as cross-border and national conflict prevention, capacity building initiatives at both national and regional level, and strategic actions based on the recommendation from the research. Thank you very much for listening my franglais, because I live in a French-speaking country. I hope that everyone followed what I said. Thank you.
Oh, Asante Dos, that was a very clear presentation, and you spoke very well. We understood everything and followed everything that you were saying. I think my main two questions after the presentation of ISOCO and Partners for Development and Peace are around issues of political will. How do we build political will in the various countries to support gender equality and issues of women, peace and security? I think that that's the main point. And also, how do we marshal the resources for the work so that we have the human resources, we also have the economic resources that are needed for the implementation of that agenda. We are now moving to the partners from the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and Sylvie Jacqueline Ndongumo is a peace and security leader with almost 25 years experience. She's working to enhance capacities of community women peace builders and mediators, and provide technical support to different groups and networks of women, as well as strengthening the role of women in peace processes. She's the president of WPS Cameroon and the regional representative of WPS in the Africa region. A presentation provides the background for the project that WPS is conducting with national focal points, including Cameroon and the DRC. So Sylvie, Jacqueline, you can take the platform now. Can I kindly ask you to speak in 10 minutes so that we have time for a meaningful discussion after the presentation? Sylvie.
Thank you so much, Nesai, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm so happy to be here today. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be in this panel with you. As you already indicated, I will be speaking first for the Women International League for Peace and Freedom. And it's very important to start by giving an idea of what is the organization. So I would like ask you to help me with sharing the screen. Yes, as Netsai rightly indicated in her introduction, there is a project which is being carried on within WILF, and it concerns a few countries. DRC and Cameroon are part of it, and the idea is to really see how to engage men and boys for feminist peace. That's the idea around the project. And the Women International League for Peace and Freedom is that international organization with national section covering every continent. And there's an international secretariat based in Geneva and an office in New York. And what I can also say is that it's 160 years old today. And the mission is really to bring together, to mobilize women from around the world who are united in working for peace by non-violent means. It's very important to indicate this non-violent approach and promoting political, economic, and social justice for all. We have mainly 4 programs and then another one which is cross-cutting. The first one is the Women Peace and Security Agenda, Security Program. With this program, we really push for the agenda of Women Peace and Security Agenda to be implemented. We want women to be at the table in peace, on peace tables. So the Women Peace and Security Agenda is our main program. We also have a human rights program and also a disarmament program. Maybe I want to talk about the disarmament program just to say that it was discovered through research and all over the years that there is a direct link between gender-based violence and disarmament. So it's a link. The more proliferation of weapons, the more armament and the more cases of gender-based violence are seen in different countries. So we are running this program to really draw attention on the need to be very careful as we are dealing with the weapons and all the industry around the weapons. The crisis response is a program that we are running, and it is related to what happened after with all this crisis all over the world. What happened to the women? What happened to the communities during crisis? What is the impact? What are the responses after the crisis? So everything having to do with humanitarian is under that one. As I mentioned, there is a cross-cutting program that we call Young WILF. As you see, the organization is very old, and therefore there is a need to prepare the transition. So that's why the youth program is very important. And then cross-cutting, yes. And then, yes.
Jacqueline?
Yes.
We can't hear you very clearly. Maybe you can position yourself such that you are closer to the computer so that maybe and speak louder. We can hardly hear some of the things.
Okay. I have to speak louder.
Yes.
Can you hear me now? I would need to shout a bit. Yes. As you indicated in the presentation, I am just going to share background on the project that we are conducting in these countries. And the project is titled Confronting Militarized Masculinities or Engaging Men and Boys for Feminist Peace. And it runs through from March 2020 to December 2021. And the partners involved in this project are Men Alliance, Youth Section in Afghanistan, Colombia, DRC, and Cameroon. And we have now started also some local actions in a certain number of countries, including CAR, Lebanon, Nigeria, Sri Lanka, Sudan, and Zimbabwe. What do we mean by masculinities? Masculinities are the range of roles, the range of behavior, and all the attributes that are associated with maleness, and they are considered appropriate for boys and men in a given or specific society. And masculinities are expressed at individual level through the behavior and also at cultural level through the images, the stories, and institutionally through laws, policies, and procedures. Masculinity is also defined in relation to its socially constructed opposite femininity. So most of the time, the term masculinities and feminities are dependent upon each other for their meaning. So masculinity does not exist except it is in contrast to feminities and vice versa. And we are dealing with militarized masculinities. The militarized masculinities are socially constructed gender norms that associate masculinity with power, with violence, with control. And these norms are enabled by institutions that really put a high role, heroism, violence, and fund the war system. So they feel that this institution feel that violence, the war, the weapons are something which are most important than any other thing. And what we refer by feminist peace, because we are talking about engaging men and boys for feminist peace. We intend, we call here feminist peace is a human-centered peace based on equality, justice, and demilitarized security that involve addressing the root causes of violence with a feminist lens that pays attention to power dynamics and challenges patriarchy and traditional gender roles. And most importantly, advances the need and rights of women and people of all genders. So it is very important to outline here the fact of addressing the root causes of violence. The project stands from the fact that there were discussions in the past year between WILF and Men Engaged Global Secretariat and partner organizations, including global consultation at the UN. So that is the result of a number of years of discussion with these different groups. And it aims, as I indicated at the beginning, in engaging men, exploring feminist approaches to gender transformation that tackle militarized masculinities and economy and promote feminist peace. Local, national work and connected to global advocacy. So all the work we are doing support our advocacy at global level. The key priorities in the project is to challenge the gender root causes of violence using the following strategies. We feel that it's extremely important to strengthen alliances by mobilizing men to work with women for feminist peace. It's very important for men to work with women and also to have boys and girls in this work. It's very important also to improve knowledge of stakeholders on gender root causes of violence, because sometimes it's because there is lack of knowledge that people don't address it properly. So it's very important through this project. We are also trying to improve the different stakeholders' knowledge on the root causes of violence so that when they are aware, they will take appropriate action. And we also thirdly want to enhance actions to implement the Women, Peace and Security agenda. So that's the key idea that we want, that the agenda should be really enhanced through this action. Key strategies that we are using include local and global research, using a participatory feminist political economy approach. In most of these countries, like the case of Cameroon, this is something quite new. So that's why we feel that research is extremely important and work at local level is very important. And alliance building is extremely important because we feel that we want to change the mindset regarding men's role and all these patriarchal systems. So we need to build alliances for stronger advocacy. Another strategy is national, regional, and global advocacy, connecting with ongoing programs. So we make sure that our national work inform the regional and then the global level, and also being connected to the ongoing WILF program. So this is very quickly indicated an idea of what we are working in this country, in these different countries regarding the main roles to support the feminist agenda. So I remain available to provide more clarification if need be. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
All right. Thank you so much, Sylvie Jacqueline, for that comprehensive presentation. And it's good that you have done those slides so that we could follow them and understand what you were saying. Thank you very much. I think some of the issues you raised, which are very critical, are issues of alliance building. How do we build alliances that are strong to work on women, peace and security, as well as gender equality in our various settings? And the local and global research is very critical to inform the advocacy that we carry out at the national, regional, and global level. And we have said that some of the work that you are engaging in, as well as also working with men and boys to promote feminist peace. I think very critical areas that you raised there. And thank you to sticking to our time. And now can I move on to another partner in the house, Guy Blaze Fegap, who is a teacher, writer, and activist engaged in peace building within WPS Cameroon. He is working with the overall role to educate young persons. He joined the WPS in breaking gender stereotypes and building a world free of armed conflict, which is quite critical. You will be speaking about WPS Cameroon in mobilizing men and boys to implement the women, peace, and security agenda. Guy, can I give you the floor and also give you 10 minutes? Those with questions, kindly note them for the end.
Yes, thank you, Nita, for giving me the floor to speak on following what Sylvie had just presented. I will start by sharing my screen too, so that we follow together. So Sylvie presented the program as it is developed at the international level, as it's planned to be implemented in some focal countries, including Cameroon. So I'm going to share here some examples of what we have been doing in Cameroon as part of this project of engaging men and boys in peace building. So the background of the project in Cameroon. So we consider the Cameroon not excluded from the other African countries in which the cultural norms are in a patriarchal environment in which women are not usually allowed to speak publicly in some communities. No matter what you have to say, they want to express, in some communities, they do not have the possibility to do so. And despite the emancipation of women and the legal framework that have been improved over the years, the society in which we are, which is very masculine, does not really accept that women participate in various peace processes. So in the context of Cameroon in particular, from the gender conflict analysis we conducted from July 2019 to March 2020, men are main sources of conflict for several reasons, some of which are the patriarchal society and the cultural environment, which is intimately linked to power structures. And this is constructed in the mentalities, and in the reality, it is also materialized that we can see there is increasing masculinizations of force in our country. So our strategy is to implement this project with the main objectives to explore different ways of implementing the women's agenda, strengthen alliances by mobilizing men to work with women and improve the knowledge of stakeholders on gender root of violence. So this is the objective. I'm going to share some strategies we put in place to implement this objective. So as part of building alliances, so we first had to identify and meet with local civil society organizations and partners to establish a working group. We have a national working group which includes CSOs and some other partners to work together, to plan and strategize together. This was the first step as part of a larger building. And we have to go closer to the community by subgranting two local organizations in two regions, the East and the West region, which are our focal implementation locations, because those regions are particular in that they have religious and traditional habits with strong masculinities. And another step was to hold consultation workshops and solidarity meetings to strengthen this group of civil society organization partners working and learning together on what is masculinities and how we can confront this issue in the country. So what is still to do next is to train all those partners to understand very well what is the masculinities and conduct the research. Yes, from this alliance building, we understood that the concept of masculinity, because we could understand very well what is the concept of masculinities, as Sylvia explained earlier. And now we can better carry out education and advocacy work, knowing what is masculinity. Because in the past, we used to do some of work engaging men and boys without really knowing that this has a name. This is what is called masculinities. And knowing that the name of the work we were doing to mobilize men and boys in a certain way was called masculinities, it is good now for us to advocate for that issue to be considered in the legal framework. So building alliances with men engaged networks and other actors promoting women's rights was another significant change we have to consider. And shaping the understanding that militarized masculinity are a threat to peace, which was not very well known. Now in Cameroon, we know that militarized masculinities are a threat to peace, and you can say it. So contribution to increase information and action on the need to stand against it. So it was good that we should stand against violent masculinities. And to end on this point, we started conversations with the administrative and traditional authorities on the issue of masculinities, and making the topic more down to earth was also good to understand very well, to do a good communication. Because at the beginning, the project was called Confronting Militarized Masculinities, which was not very good in communication. People were not very well understanding what we wanted to mean. And we took it easier by saying simply engaging men and boys for peace building. Now it's good for sensitization and communication. Yes, as part of the analysis, we have developed local evidence-based research conducted. We are in the process of conducting a research to understand the causes of masculinities and identify possible solutions and promote knowledge sharing and learning. So the research is being prepared now. In the coming weeks, we are going to the field to have interactive dialogue and focus group meetings to understand, and also have filmmaking to interview some key actors to share their experiences in this work. So when we have it, as part of the advocacy part of this project, we identify key local authorities, opinion leaders, key government representatives, and parliamentarians to have meetings. We have to communicate and disseminate key messages to induce a general change of mindset. This is being done already, and we have to continue. And we also have to advocate for concrete change in international practices, policies, law, norms, and or international, and any program where it's necessary to include this issue. And this is already done. I'm showing this picture to show an example of how we are having this change in Cameroon with the advocacy we are conducting. We are now in the process of reviewing the National Action Plan of the UN Security Council's Resolution 1325 in Cameroon. The first National Action Plan we have expired in December last year, and civil society are now gathering to show their contribution to the government. And amongst this contribution, civil society organizations think that we should consider consider the role of men and boys in the implementation of women, peace, and security agenda. So this recommendation is part of civil society contribution in the review of the National Action Plan, so that men and boys can also contribute in the women, peace, and security agenda. So this is basically what we have done in Cameroon as part of the engaging men and boys in peace building. The project will continue until December this year. So I think we'll have other opportunity to share more about the results of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy, for that comprehensive presentation. I like your use of language engaging men and boys for peace building. It's very positive, and it carries the message through. I think we'll move on to take the last speaker, who is Annie Matundu Bambi, who is the president of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom in the DRC. She's a gender and development consultant. She's an activist and advocate on women's rights issues for the past 20 years. She's the author of the glossary on the terms of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 and its related resolutions of the agenda, Women, Peace and Security. She's representing DRC's implementation of the project to confront militarized masculinities. Note that she will be speaking in French, so those who can't understand, can you quickly maneuver so that you get the French translation from Annie? Annie, the floor is yours. You can go ahead.
Merci, Netsa, pour cette opportunité que vous m'accordez de pouvoir expliquer l'étude que nous sommes en train de mener en RDC. Cette étude est menée par 4 sections de WILF, comme Guy et Sylvie venaient de le dire. Donc, c'est mené au niveau du Cameroun, la Colombie, l'Afghanistan et la RDC. Faire face aux masculinités militarisées. Je voudrais un peu expliquer comment nous sommes en train de mettre en œuvre cette étude au niveau de la RDC. Si vous pouvez partager l'écran, oui, voilà. Donc, nos actions s'inscrivent dans 3 grandes activités, à savoir la construction d'alliances, la recherche et les plaidoyers. Donc, il y a ces 3 grandes activités qui concernent l'étude sur la masculinité militarisée. Et dans la construction d'alliance, qu'est-ce que nous faisons? Dis, si tu peux partager l'écran. Voilà, nous essayons d'engager les organisations des ménangages et celles ayant des approches d'engager les hommes et les garçons dans l'égalité des genres pour pouvoir travailler pour la paix féministe, afin de les associer avec les autres organisations féminines. Et de là, nous commençons à déceler les opportunités de collaboration pour être beaucoup plus efficaces. Et en même temps, nous œuvrons avec les femmes militantes des organisations des droits des femmes à travers leurs organisations en faisant le renforcement des capacités sur la question de la paix féministe. Donc, nous amenons, comme je venais de le dire, ces organisations, tant féministes et les autres, à développer une certaine redevabilité par rapport à leur propre engagement au travers du travail qu'elles mènent, surtout en ce qui concerne le travail de l'égalité des genres. Et à travers ces organisations, nous menons ce que nous appelons des dialogues solidaires entre les hommes et les femmes pour consolider la conviction et planifier des actions pour une paix féministe en jetant les bases d'une paix durable pour la mise en œuvre de la résolution 1325 du Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies de l'agenda Femmes, Paix et Sécurité. Le point culminant pour la construction d'alliances, cette approche et outil utilisé, nous mettons vraiment l'accent sur la redevabilité, qui est un outil important susceptible d'enclencher la prise de conscience face à des objectifs fixés qui les ont animés dans l'activisme. Par exemple, nous posons des questions aux participants pour savoir pourquoi ils veulent travailler pour changer l'approche des ménangages, pour changer l'approche de mener les hommes et les garçons, de pouvoir s'impliquer dans cette construction d'alliance. Et en tant que coordinatrice de ce projet en RDC, nous avons fait une belle approche avec le réseau Ménangage de la RDC, une approche qui nous a permis d'avoir des implications des organisations et des réseaux de ménangage dans les activités et les initiatives de construction d'alliances. Donc, nous travaillons avec ces organisations ménangage en RDC et les organisations féminines qui ont l'approche d'amener les hommes et les garçons pour s'attaquer aux normes patriarcales et les rôles sexuels spécifiques traditionnels. Le deuxième volet, c'est la recherche. Nous sommes en train de mener la recherche dans 3 provinces en RDC, dans la province de la ville de Kinshasa, dans la province du Nord Kivu et dans la province de l'Ituri. Notre recherche, c'est d'abord de comprendre les relations de pouvoir entre ces relations par la violence, les conflits armés et surtout la guerre en RDC. Et ensuite, comprendre les raisons de la demande d'armes. Pourquoi il y a cette prolifération d'armes et son impact sur les communautés et les masculinités dans toutes les étapes du conflit, en particulier avant le conflit. Comprendre l'impact aussi d'une bonne compréhension du genre sur l'implication des hommes pour s'attaquer aux normes patriarcales et les rôles sexuels spécifiques traditionnels. Donc, en menant cette recherche, nous nous basons sur ces points que nous considérons comme capital pour bien comprendre ce que nous appelons la masculinité militarisée en RDC. Donc, après la recherche qui est menée dans les 3 provinces, nous allons faire des plaidoyers Et ces plaidoyers vont être, voilà, donc je venais d'expliquer, cette recherche aussi, nous allons nous baser sur le focus group. Nous avons des cibles que nous allons prendre pour faire ces focus group et d'autres cibles pour des interviews. Par exemple, on va chercher des ex-combattants pour savoir pourquoi ils sont entrés dans la rébellion et pourquoi ils sont sortis. Qu'est-ce qui les ont poussés à entrer vraiment dans la rébellion et pourquoi ils sont sortis dans la rébellion? Est-ce qu'ils ont encore envie de retourner ou ils sont sortis pour la dernière fois? On va essayer de faire aussi un film documentaire où nous allons interviewer différentes composantes pour la bonne compréhension de la masculinité et militarisée. Également, on est en train de parcourir différentes revues documentaires pour voir ce que les autres ont déjà fait afin d'arriver peut-être à un résultat commun dans la recherche que nous sommes en train de mener en RDC. Et enfin, le troisième point, ça sera le plaidoyer. Dans les plaidoyers, nous allons voir les actions de construction d'alliances et la recherche qui va déterminer le choix des actions et des cibles des différents plaidoyers. Mais ces plaidoyers seront faits au niveau des décideurs compétents au niveau national, avec, en se basant sur la célébration des dates universelles africaines en lien avec les questions de paix, des droits des femmes qui seraient exploitées comme des opportunités de plaidoyer. Et à la fin, il y aura à la publication des enseignements de la recherche au niveau d'un grand format où nous inviterons toutes les institutions et les personnes qui travaillent dans l'approche de pouvoir amener les hommes et les garçons pour qu'il y ait une paix féministe. Voilà en gros ce que nous faisons. Donc, je peux conclure en disant que nous voulons arriver à transformer les genres et les masculinités pour faire avancer la paix. Les hommes au sein du gouvernement et des organisations politiques peuvent et doivent soutenir la participation politique et le leadership des femmes sur les questions des femmes, de paix et de sécurité. En un mot, c'est les questions de l'agenda femmes, paix, sécurité. Et les hommes et les garçons doivent œuvrer sur l'égalité des genres. Voilà en gros les trois étapes qui concernent notre étude. S'il y a des questions, je suis prête pour répondre. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Thank you so much, Annie Matundu, for that presentation. That sums up the presentation from the 6 presenters, from ISOCO partners, and also from the WOLF 6 presenters. Very rich presentation, very comprehensive. And now we will be taking on the questions from the floor. I think the last presenter for me, what I liked was the research that they are doing, which is focusing on the power relations between men and women and how this ultimately influences war and peace at the end of the day. And also wanting to know why there is such a high demand for weapons in the region and what can be done about it. I think when you do a research and then you do implementation, it can be really effective because you are responding to a situation that you know very well on the ground. So we would love to receive results of this research in Matundu so that we can follow some of the things you are doing. And also you mentioned issues of the solidarity dialogue that happen between men and women. I think this is very critical in terms of holding the men accountable when they are working on the women, peace and security agenda. To what extent are they faithful in everything that they do and they don't take over the discussion or actually promote another agenda as they work to promote a feminist peace at the end of the day. I noticed there is already one question that was asked to Sylvie Jacqueline, which says, what are the non-negotiables for men's engagement in the peace process to avoid the pitfalls of the patriarchal mindset? So already that is the question would you want to attempt that, Sylvie Jacqueline? And I'd also asked a number of questions along the way when the presenters were doing their presentation. Can you also attempt to respond to those? I think I'd asked about political will. How do we advocate for political will so that we have a leadership that is working actively with us and promoting our agenda actively, like what is happening in Rwanda? What did Rwanda do to get that political will for gender equality and peace in their country? Any questions from the floor before they respond?
I would thank you so much. I would like I wrote in the chat that the question is not very clear for me. If she can precise it, thank you. I'll also write my question in the chat.
So Soma KP, would you mind expanding on your question to Jacqueline?
Hello, good evening. This is Soma here from India. Thank you so much for this opportunity to ask my question. Jacqueline, I found your presentation very interesting. Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Thank you. I wanted to know on what conditions do you allow men to get involved in the process? Because very often they can come in with those same kind of aggressive masculinity and try to hijack the process. So to be able to be part of this process, what is the process by which you vet them or check that they are not going to repeat the same kind of patterns of aggressive masculinity in the project process as well? Do you have some criteria? Do you have some norms by which they must conduct themselves and participate in the project process? For instance, being part of the collective process?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. It's very clear now.
Thank you.
Yes, I want to say that I want to share one example so that you understand how we work. Recently, we have somebody who's working with us, and then in our WhatsApp group, the person that man shared a message which was a kind of undermining women, undermining. He just recently joined the group, and then he shared a very negative message in the WhatsApp group. I was in the same group. I asked him to apologize because he was in the wrong group, because he came and he was given the policies of the organization. So we were very clear to him that if that is the case, he is at the wrong place. And if he cannot apologize, therefore he cannot be in our midst. So the same norms are maybe the same that we have for every member who wants to join the project, but we make sure to a kind of let the men know that there is some type of language set. We want them to change the language, because they are our allies. The minute that they are part of our process, they align with us, they work with us to change the mindset. So therefore, they cannot be also the people who are the perpetrators. So what we do is essentially a kind of, how do I call it? When they are there, we kind of have a working session with them to understand very clearly what are our expectations with them, because they are now those people who are going to help us in the communities. Of course, there are always a few cases that always disrupt, but our policies are very clear. The minute we do that, if we do that on maybe because it's already in your mind, we can just help you to come out of it. But if it is done on purpose, therefore we are very strict. We don't allow such in our midst. And also the language that those men use even out of of the group is also very important. So we work with them even out of the, but honestly, with this project, we are really looking forward to be able to identify some of these things that we can list in a document and say that this is something that we should expect, and this is something that we should not expect, because we have had like 2 cases which were unpleasant. But generally, we do a kind of check. There is a kind of checking to see the morality of the people we are working with. If not, we are going to have a negative result, or we are going to have an unexpected result instead of having men who are aligning with us to move the agenda forward. Thank you.
Would any other presenter want to go on and answer that same question? Those who are working on masculinities and engaging men for gender equality and peace building.
Yes, I can see in the chat that she just asked me, for example, if there are trainings on feminist principle and approaches that they go through. As I indicated, most of the time, whether when it's about the men, we make sure that they understand this principle, because for some of them it is new, it is something new. And because they have grown in a society where they don't always master this, we take this opportunity most of the time at the beginning to let them know what the principle entails. That's why we were able to a kind of punish, let me put it the word like this, the other one who failed to use a language which was appropriate to the women. So yes, we do have training so that they understand it, and we always ask them to get back to us in case they are still having some doubts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that response. And you are correct, Soma, when you engage men, many times they come in. Sometimes if they don't have the proper orientation, they will come in and take over. I'm remembering an incident when I was still working in the women's movement, and we invited men to an International Women's Day march, and they came and marched with us, and we were marching for about 1 kilometer. By the time we were halfway through the march, the men were already in front of us. And by the time we finished the march, they were the ones talking to the journalists, because they were the ones who arrived first, because they walk faster than us. And they are so used to taking over environments and situations. So it's important to make sure that the men that we work with and the men that are promoting our agenda are trained, and they are well aware of the agenda that we are conducting at the end of the day. So I don't see any more questions coming from our listeners. I'm going to go through the presenters and ask if any of you want to respond to the questions I asked along the way, or if you have other insights that we can benefit from. Kelly Jones.
Can I ask a question, very brief? Just ask a question.
Yes,
she mentioned ecological model. So my question is just to understand very well what is ecological model. Thank you.
All right. Can we quickly have a response to that? The ecological model. Okay, whilst we are brainstorming on that, can I ask Kelly Jones if you want to respond to any of the issues I raised, or any parting shots for the session?
Can you remind me of some questions? That would be great.
Okay. I'd asked Kelly about issues of political will. How do we build political will among the leadership of various countries so that they are eager to promote gender equality? I think when we listened from Rwanda, what we saw is that the government has passed so much legislation, and there's so much support for gender equality in terms of policies, in terms of laws, in terms of even giving resources for gender equality. So any insights from you on how we can build that political will among our leaders? Because in many cases it's not there, that political will. We have leadership sometimes that is male-based, and tends to respond negatively to promoting gender equality and the women, peace and security agenda?
I would love to hear more about that actually from Verdian from Rwanda, because Rwanda out of most of the region has the most political will. And so I'd love to hear from her voice and her perspective.
Okay, thank you for that. Any parting shots for the session?
Oui, effectivement, nous avons un grand problème avec nos dirigeants dans tous les États, surtout en Afrique. On a beaucoup parlé de Rwanda qui montre l'exemple dans cette volonté politique de pouvoir amener les femmes dans des postes de prise de décision. Mais ce que nous faisons, c'est un grand plaidoyer pour continuer à dire à nos dirigeants des textes, qu'il y a des lois et que nous voulons que ces textes et ces lois puissent être mis en application. Parce que la plupart des pays ont quand même ratifié tout ce qui sont comme instruments juridiques ayant trait à la promotion des droits spécifiques des femmes. Mais ce qui fait défaut, c'est l'application, c'est la mise en œuvre qui n'arrive pas à suivre. Donc, nous continuons à faire ces grands plaidoyers, et surtout en se basant sur la coalition Génération Égalité, qui est en train d'essayer pour le moment de pouvoir amener nos dirigeants à pouvoir mettre en œuvre tous les textes et lois qui ont été ratifiés, que ce soit au niveau national, régional, sous-régional et international, et en se basant sur la résolution 1325 qui donne quand même le go comme un outil de plaidoyer pour la promotion des droits spécifiques des femmes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks so much. And Vendian, you can go ahead.
Okay, so I was trying to unmute, but I don't know how the hosts make it. So thank you for the question. Actually, I can just say two words. The first thing to get the leaders to be engaged in the political will, most of the time I say it depends of which kind of leader. Like in Rwanda, the president of the Rwanda, Paul Kagame, is a really gender-sensitive person. So when a women advance their rights, it's come easy to him to understand that women is a human being. So that's one. Also, I think also depending on where we came from, we came from genocide against Tutsi. So first of all, women suffered a lot about that. And on the other hand, women were involved in the struggle to bring peace. So I think the leaders which we are involved to bring peace in Rwanda, to stop genocide, see how much women can play a big role for peace, stability. So also, so I always think that we have a leader which is gender sensitive, President Kagame, and also women from Rwanda have shown that women can do it, have shown resilience. During genocide, they suffered. They were like champ de bataille, for those who understand French. If someone say c'est un champ de bataille, that means that it was like the genocide was doing during the women, because they suffered, they get violated, and they give pardon. They are resilient on that. You can't imagine someone who has exterminated all your family, and you pardon him. So we show that women has a strength, and We showed by examples. We did it. We were involved in the rebreathing our country after genocide. Women were everywhere to start again, refresh our country. So I think there's two parts to play. Is the leader is gender sensitive? Is women themselves believe on their power? And they can even demonstrate that. Yeah, so I think that's actually helps Rwandese women and the leaders to try all their best, to try put all the instruments to help gender equality in place. Even if we are not yet there, already 100%, but we are going there. So I think that's what I can share about Rwanda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vendian. That's an eye-opener for us. Guy, you have raised your hand. You'll be my last speaker, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Neta. You gave me the floor earlier, but I tried to connect, but I have a little issue. That's why I could not speak at that moment. And I wanted to say a few things about the questions asked in the chat by Adro Sabiri about women's violence too, because when we talk about men's violence, there are also women's violence. And the question was about what do women's group usually do in this type of situation so that the women's violence is not looked as isolated incidences. So taking the example from Wilf in Cameroon, I mentioned in my presentation that we carried out the gender conflict analysis, and this shows gender roles in the conflict, how both men and women are gender agent of conflict. And we have to highlight that in the conflict, there are not only men fighting, there are also women who are in arms group, who are also carrying arms to fight. And I think this was just like in balance to show that not only men do violence. So it is good that we recognize that also women are agents of violence when we do the advocacy and when we do community work. So when we know that from the recommendations we do in the report is to also lay an action of educating women too, not limited to men. So also educate women on peace values, on their role in peace building in the community. And from this we usually have community work with women, and from these community meetings we educate women on their roles on peace building, because sometimes most of women react violently because they don't know how to go about it, and we educate them on what they have to do, and this helps. So women's group, as can say, recognizing that the women violence, and they also recommend that women should be educated and work together with men, as we are saying. So this is what was the last thing I wanted to say. Thank you, Nita.
All right, thank you so much. We are now at 5:06, past our closing time, and I want to thank all of you for attending the session. I also want to thank all my presenters for coming in to present. I think we have gleaned so much information and knowledge around issues of working on the Beijing Platform for Action, and also engaging men and boys on issues around women, peace and security. Our 1325. So thank you so much, everyone. Let's continue doing the work. And to Fendi Soko, I hope you will be coming soon with some of the results of the research and the work that you are doing, so that we continue learning from your great examples. Thank you, everyone.